So this here is the real mystery. Even under these loosened criteria, there are no simple languages used among other species, though there are many equally interesting. Jokes are endlessly fascinating because they provide an insidiously logical punchline that we are able to anticipate or predict. A successful punchline cannot be just a non sequitur. It must follow inevitably and obviously, if only after the fact. The minor cognitive implosion summed up by "now I get this" is in part an experience of admiration at being fooled so well, simply and not so logically. As with a magic trick, the key to a good joke is misdirection. Self-imposed, the way that we are naturally thinking about the subject of the joke and precisely the causes for our capacity to be fooled. Intelligent tests and brain teasers of 10 challenge our capability to think outside of the self-imposed and overly narrow concepts, and we consider the facilities and leaps to logic marks of intelligence. Indeed, the criterion for calling something a work of genius is seldom its complexity, but rather how innovative and the approaches to how many others were unable to see it. This is why some of the great discoveries in many fields have been made by people too tend to quiet outside of the inner circle of true experts. And because of the experts are 10 of 2 acquired with an acquainted problem, this is a novel way. As the great biologist Thomas is said to exclaimed after learning the Darwin's theory of natural selection. How stupid of me not to have thought of that. Sometimes what we do best works against us. The difficulties that a problem poses are a function of both its intrinsic complexity and the learner's dispositions to attend to its most relevant aspects. Comparative psychologism and the long struggle, the entangled question of general, and having been more sensitive to the problem of understanding a species' capabilities in the context of its natural environment, they are finding correlation between the differences in learning. Animal breeders have noticed these patterns for generations. Some breeds of dogs make better shepherds, some make better hunters, some make better seeing eye dogs. And there are almost always trade offs. Behavioral predispositions that are well suited to one sort of task of 10 conflict with others. This sort of complementarity is also evident in the studies of the effects of the brain damage on animal learning. It is uncommon to find that rather than producing impairment across the board, localized brain damage enhances learning of some tasks at the same time that it impairs learning of others. Such paradoxical enhancement shows that learning is not a monolithic brain process. Learning rates and species talk-specific tasks are dependent on the subject's particular balance between alternative predispositions. The notion that one can be better or worse at all forms of learning and ignorance intrinsically competitive in nature. Different learning paradigms are applied. The best attentional and mnemonic strategies for one type of a task may be exactly wrong for another one. Just as our past experiences are accumulated knowledge and can in some cases pose impediments of solving a novel problem. So can the evolutionary heritage of one species set it up to be handled in some cognitive problematic way, well, in other poorly suited extended members of the species who are innately biased to attend to irrelevant details and to ignore critical elements of a problem. They are pre-maladapted. This suggests a very different way to approach the language and its mystery. Could there be something about the way even a simple language must be learned that is just awkward for other species? Could symbolic references be naturally counterintuitive? The fact that language is an unprecedented form of naturally evolved communication compared to other forms suggests that it is likely a requirement, a rather different problem solving orientation in order to learn something. The point of this is missing languages paradox. It is a difficult, most species have different learning language routes and do not appear to be sufficiently diminished in this way. This somehow, they don't get the language problem, what it's about. This suggests that it is not only also difficult against certain other predispositionings, and they're strong. Languages might require, and a way to run counter to other typical learning strategies. Just getting started, getting what it means for a word or sign to represent something and not simply to point it out or to bring about a mind by dissociation. It symbolizes it and requires a kind of mental gymnastics for which most non-human brains are pre-maladapted. And even with the considerable human social experiences of specific training and support for their vocal limitations, only a select few non-human animals have ever come to grasp the symbolic relationships we have tried to teach them. Instead, most exhibit a remarkable capacity for anticipating responses, mimicking actions, and committing large sets of paired associations of memory, sophisticated abilities, and such, and not symbolic abilities. In other words, how could something as simple as a word meaning be counterintuitive and awkward for other species to grasp? This question has its own special awkwardness. The explanation of the nature of word meaning has challenged thinkers since before recorded philosophy, and it continues to plague every field where explanations of thought process are important. Thousands of years and thousands of texts later, we still do not fully understand the basis of this relationship that invests the word and inverts them with their meanings and referential capability. To be blunt, we do not really understand one of the most commonplace experiences. We know how to use a word to mean something and to refer to something. We know how to coin new words and to assign new meanings to them. We know how to do that. We know how to create codes and artificial languages, yet we do not know how to do this and that and the other thing. When we do, or rather, we know the surface area, but we do not know how to mental process underlining XT, much less with the neural processes that are involved. The fact that a conceptual problem this basic has gone unresolved for so many generations suggests that something more than just a technical difficulty stands in the way of my understanding. It is not just a difficult puzzle. The concept seems to be as counterintuitive for us to understand as it is simple for use and for us to use. Few topics have generated as much debate and confusion. So one might think that this question is hardly the place to choose a beginning for the analysis of the human language origins, and don't we risk getting stuck in the philosophical mire of the most difficult and critical questions first, in order to avoid following pointless leads? Dozens of theories purport to explain the many aspects of this relationship between a wizard and a wand. Philosophers, psychologists, and linguists have been arguing for centuries over such matters. This is giving a rise to the building intelligent machine in context, and is finding curious scholars, engineers failing to take into account the anomalous nature of this form of reference. Shouldn't I be lacking counterparts to words and sentences in this rest of the biological wordplay, significant rolling and thinking about the problem? Oh, all the enormous powerful computing devices that we find in our heads and birds and mammals only use a symbolic mode of reference. What hints about its nature have we missed it because we were ignoring the reality? The main reason for this seems to have been ignored, and it is generally assumed that other species do exhibit counterparts to words and sentences in their natural repertoires. Ambiguous definitions of what constitutes words, sentences, and languages on the one hand, and reference meaning and understanding on the other, allow researchers to stretch metaphorical use for these terms to fit